We've sort of tackled some of the really basic gaps right now in terms of user experience with our application Motoswap, which allows, again, the user to trustlessly, non-custodially, and permissionlessly create LPs, deploy tokens, create LPs, open trading, liquidity mine. There's a number of things that you can do with these tokens now is programmable and, most importantly, non-custodial and permissionless. So the user experience is much vastly improved as far as token trading with our application Motoswap. But I think that as more and more applications come into the space and start developing, we'll start to see a bunch of different user experiences emerge on Bitcoin Layer 1, whether it is lending or staking your Bitcoin, or stablecoin protocols, stablecoin issuance. Bitcoin issued stablecoins, I think, are going to be a really hot narrative that again, OpNet really allows for super ease of access to deploy these types of applications. This is really where I think the user experience is going to shine.
Welcome back, everyone. We have an interesting one today, kind of like Bitcoin meets EVM, EVM meets Bitcoin. Where's it all going? We've had ordinals, we've had all of this kind of like the surge of interesting things happening on Bitcoin. And we have two very interesting individuals, Chad and Danny, this morning, this evening, depending on where you guys are. I know that they're evening, I'm morning. Yeah, so I'm not going to do too much of an intro. Just trust me, this is going to be an interesting one. Danny, Chad, welcome. Danny, kick it off. Good to have you guys. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you very much for having us on. We are with two projects that kind of link together. One is called OpNet, which is a Bitcoin Layer 1 meta protocol specifically made for smart contracts. So very simple way to understand that is the ordinal client was made for NFTs on Bitcoin, and OpNet is basically like that, but made for smart contracts. So there's no gas token or anything like that. It's just Bitcoin, and everything exists on the L1 itself. And then on top of OpNet, we've built Motoswap, which is basically a Uniswap fork, Uniswap v2 fork on Bitcoin for DEX trading and liquidity pools and liquidity mining, all that fun stuff. We want to see it happen on Bitcoin L1 directly. So we hope to kick off the SlowFi Bitcoin DeFi season with those two things.
Yeah, and a really high level overview of how it works is basically you deploy your smart contracts directly onto the Bitcoin blockchain. You interact with those smart contracts through Bitcoin transactions. You make your transactions using Bitcoin wallets. So pretty much everything is completely native to Bitcoin Layer 1. I know we've sort of seen a lot of projects and Layer 2 solutions trying to bring functionality to Bitcoin through side chains or things that actually really don't mesh with Bitcoin Layer 1 at all. A lot of these solutions actually don't even touch Bitcoin Layer 1, and we wanted to deploy something that really allowed for full creativity, full expressibility, full programmability on Bitcoin Layer 1, because again, in our opinion, my opinion, I think that app development on Bitcoin Layer 1, stuff like DeFi, pretty much anything you could really do on any other blockchain, I think that's going to be a really important development for Bitcoin. I think it's going to be something that I think is going to power Bitcoin. And honestly, I think that this type of narrative is really what's going to be driving the next bull run.
So, yeah, great intro. You guys didn't hold back, just jumped straight into it. So there's obviously quite a bit there that we can chat about just to kick things off. And that's, obviously this whole idea of Bitcoin DeFi. And I think a lot of people have been paying too much attention to kind of like the meme side of things. And you guys have obviously, and there's a lot of other guys that have been very busy with this whole idea of incorporating smart contracts. Essentially, the idea is smart contracts as a functional basis onto Bitcoin. I want to get into kind of like what other ecosystems and protocols are doing in terms of like that relationship between Bitcoin and EVM at a later stage. But I just want to unpack in terms of like what you see And Chad, you can kick it off. Like, what do you see, or how do you define Bitcoin DeFi? I mean, and it's I mean, from the most obvious to maybe kind of like your kind of like quirky side of it, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. I would honestly say Bitcoin DeFi right now is pretty undefined. I think a lot of people are really excited about that concept, but there hasn't really been an implementation of it really anywhere. I know that people listening might be familiar with something like Bitcoin Ordinals, which is a NFT protocol, allows you to deploy NFTs to the Bitcoin blockchain, but there hasn't been anything by way of app development or anything by way of DeFi for Bitcoin. So right now it's kind of the wide open water. It's like a vast ocean that's sort of undiscovered. And in this ocean, there's a lot of liquidity that has really yet to be tapped. Um, but I think that one of the huge advantages of developing DeFi on Bitcoin at this stage is that we can look to something like Ethereum, like a test net, and look to a lot of the successful applications that have been built on Ethereum and other EVM based blockchains. And I guess sort of learn from them, uh, copy the most successful protocols, make improvements where people kind of see is necessary. And I guess what I would sort of see as the environment, and I know Danny, this is sort of Danny's coined term that has sort of now been circulating around the Twitter sphere, is SlowFi. And that's because Bitcoin, of course, is constrained to 10-minute block times on average, which means that the network moves a lot slower. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be building on Bitcoin or building applications that are based on Bitcoin. It's just that the dynamic of how assets move and trade, I think, will shift. And in a lot of ways, especially for DeFi, specifically DeFi, I think it can actually really significantly benefit the DeFi world and DeFi applications because of the slow nature of the blockchain. You are not going to experience some of the crazy fast crashes, these crazy liquidations that we saw last cycle with DeFi on Ethereum, which kind of led to some of the downfall of the interest in DeFi because a lot of people lost a lot of money in these big collapses that happen super fast. And it really kind of asks the question, for something like DeFi, which in a lot of ways mimics the financial world that lives off chain, your TradFi world. Do you need high throughput transactions? Is that something that is really a feature of the TradFi world? Like, for example, when I'm trying to get a loan at a bank, it's not like I can instantly have access to a ton of capital just like that. It takes weeks, sometimes even longer, for a bank to approve my loan. And this is somewhat of a safeguard, I think, in the TradFi world that allows for the system to be a little bit more sustainable. And obviously, things are going to move faster than that in the DeFi world. But a slower aspect, I think, really can benefit in a lot of ways. And I know this is sort of Danny's mantra, his Bible that he follows. So I kind of want to pass off to him a little bit to explain a little bit more about the SlowFi thesis.
Yeah. SlowFi is really interesting because we haven't really seen a blockchain like everything has been focused on speed for the past 2 years, ever since EIP 1559, where ETH kind of turned into a cheaper and faster experience than it was previous. We've kind of seen a drop off of DeFi TVL, especially on Ethereum, but also on places like Solana and other like high TPS blockchains. The high TPS is really great for like meme coins and for retail to have a near instantaneous experience with trading. But past trading for things like staking protocols or rebasing or Olympus DAO type protocol and liquidity things, those protocols tend to do better on a slower environment just based on the history of short history of DeFi that we have. So yeah, high TPS blockchains tend to not really have much DeFi at all, versus Bitcoin it pretty much only has JPEGs and shitcoins that people are playing on right now, which is a pretty non-optimal way to play with specifically those two types of things in a slow environment. But if I could take my Bitcoin tokens and stake them, or if I could add them to an LP and stake that LP, I could be earning rewards the same way that I do on other blockchains. But now, instead of every 1 second, in Solana, every 1 second, 100,000 people can claim their rewards or unstake a token and then sell immediately. That kind of causes these, for lack of a better term, Ponzi's to fall apart very quickly. Versus on Bitcoin, you only have 6,000 people that can do one thing every 10 minutes. That's just the way the blockchain is designed. So it sounds a little bit silly, but also the normal real world market also kind of follows this SlowFi thesis, where you're buying physical gold or real estate or even just like sending a bank transfer. That stuff takes multiple days to clear and process through. So a slow environment for finance, especially when it comes to like assets that you don't need to, not shit coins, not very speculative high volatility assets, a slower environment seems like a positive that we just haven't seen happen in crypto yet.
I mean, I think there's going to be quite a lot of disagreement with what it is that you're saying right now. I mean, obviously, it's quite a controversial take around, this whole thing. But I totally understand, like, you don't need, I get it. You don't need, like, high throughput on something that you're staking, etc., etc. Let's just jump into kind of like the really important part of this whole thing, and that's obviously attracting that liquidity to essentially come and play in inverted commas. I mean, that's actually what this is all about. You've got $1 trillion asset. There's so much of that, that collateral that's sitting there, and it's not really doing anything. How do you actually attract that? I mean, obviously, there's kind of like a lot of perspective that says that DeFi is high risk. I'm not really prepared to subject myself to that high risk. How do you see kind of like Bitcoin DeFi overcoming, in my opinion, that being the biggest stumbling block at the moment? I don't know who wants to kick this one off.
Yeah, for sure. So you can kind of look at the DeFi interest on Bitcoin based on two metrics. One is going to be the Wrap Bitcoin by BitGo solution,
Yeah.
which is basically an ERC20 token that's backed by the holdings of Bitcoin of BitGo and a couple other custodians, and that has about $10 to $12 billion of Bitcoin in it right now. So it's about 1% of the circulating supply of Bitcoin is in Wrap Bitcoin, looking for yield on EVM, ERC20 type chains. And then natively on Bitcoin, kind of the biggest metric is going to be Lightning Network, which is a pretty spectacular failure since it's been implemented about 3 years ago. There's only $300 to $400 million in TVL in the entire Lightning Network, which that pales in comparison just to the Wrap Bitcoin on ERC20. So the opportunity for growth on TVL of L1 Bitcoin is pretty insurmountable, and kind of playing back into the SlowFi portion. It's like DeFi environments thrive when there's an inflow of capital into the ecosystem, right? That's kind of why, like, this past market cycle, we haven't seen a super huge resurgence in DeFi, because the chart going from $80 billion in TVL to $180 billion in TVL, that's what, a 2.5x. That's not enough for it to be crazy APY and things like that again. So in the Bitcoin environment, even if it just goes to $1 billion in TVL, that's a pretty insane amount of growth compared to the near zero amount of dollars in TVL on L1 right now. So I do think that staking and liquidity pools, also lending, those three things are going to be kind of the main factors of attraction for Bitcoin itself to enter into like a meta protocol layer of DeFi. It's very attractive to Bitcoin people to stay on Bitcoin and have DeFi as an example. It just hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, and I might mention as well that I think a couple of things. One, that the philosophical nature of Bitcoiners cannot be underestimated. Bitcoiners fundamentally don't like to leave the Bitcoin blockchain, and they want to stay on Bitcoin layer one. and they want to play games on Bitcoin layer 1 if they're going to speculate at all. A lot of Bitcoiners are very content just holding their Bitcoin. And so the success of something like BitGo's Wrap Bitcoin on Ethereum, the fact that they were even able to get about 1% over to Ethereum, which
Yeah.
if you ask a lot of Bitcoiners, they say that Ethereum is a pre-mined shitcoin
Yeah.
Bitcoin layer 2
Mm.
that they don't want to touch. The fact that they're even able to get any of that liquidity over there at all shows that there is an amount of interest. And this is sort of my other point, is that if you were able to, well, I guess harkening back to the DeFi bull run on Ethereum, you had these crazy cranked up to the max Ponzi schemes because that was catering to the type of user that wanted to play with those. And not saying that those types of games won't be deployed to Bitcoin using the tech stack that we've put out, but I think that the games that will really have success and actually attract liquidity from these Bitcoin holders are going to be more sustainable protocols that offer a small amount of APY that's much more sustainable. Because right now, a Bitcoiner gets no yield, and so if you're able to offer even 1%, even 3%, 5% to a Bitcoiner without having to leave the Bitcoin blockchain, if you can offer this all natively on chain, I mean, that to me, I think will be the real winners of this DeFi on Bitcoin long term. I think that they'll putting all the crazy DeFi cranked up Ponzi games will attract all sorts of users from all sorts of other blockchains as well that are hunting for 1000x opportunities and stuff. But the real winners, I think, are going to be the protocols that are able to offer a safe, stable yield. And I think that the concept of DeFi has this, as you mentioned, like has this bad name to it because it's seen as this high risk speculative thing. But that's just because of how it went last cycle. I think that if you there's a lot of people, everyone who's holding Bitcoin right now who's never moved it off of Bitcoin gets 0% yield. So offering something that's more sustainable and a lot safer, less lower risk, way lower speculation. I mean, if you're able to get even 5%, 10%, 20% of the people who hold Bitcoin to stake their Bitcoin or post it as collateral on a lending platform, all natively on chain, and you offer, anywhere between anything over zero to 5 or 10% yield on that Bitcoin, without them having to move their Bitcoin off chain or utilize a sketchy platform like Celsius, etc., or FTX. Everything stays on Bitcoin. If you're able to do that, I think we're gonna see a lot of liquidity getting tapped into, and then I think that the narrative and the reputation of DeFi will fundamentally shift as more sustainable long term protocols kind of emerge.
So, are you familiar with kind of like the idea that you can time lock Bitcoin and then commit it to? So, I mean, I don't know if you've seen what the guys at Core have done, because Core DAO have got the sidechain aspect going. I think they've managed to get, I think, close to 5,000 Bitcoin, kind of like time locked and obviously dedicated as a TVL to the ecosystem, which I think obviously gives credibility to the ideas that you guys have. It's kind of like, well, what are the proven test cases that we have in the market right now? And that's kind of like, okay, well, we're in the formative stages of this journey, but there are not so much solutions, but there are ecosystems that are looking at capturing that TVL, but more importantly, giving that yield back to holders. And the biggest challenge as a Bitcoin holder for me is like, well, I don't want to give up custody. Like, screw you, I'm not going to freaking subject my Bitcoin to a contract risk, which is obviously a real risk. I think we've got a long way to go in terms of mitigating that risk, from a pure DeFi perspective. So if you've got time lock in play and you guys are incorporating that into your strategy, I think the sky's the limit. So, I mean, that's just an idea. I don't know if you guys have thought about that. Yeah, just quickly. I mean, this is something that you guys are aware of. I saw you were nodding furiously. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
well,
We actually met the Core DAO people
Cool.
in at Ethereum Denver. I had some good chats with them, and yeah, you
Yeah.
mentioned like the success of their protocol is proves that people are interested in getting this yield on their Bitcoin, and the solution which they have, which is a different solution than some, but it's a similar sort of approach that a lot of these solutions are coming up with, which it basically says, okay, you time lock your Bitcoin, or you custody it on chain in some sort of multi-sig, and on a completely separate blockchain, we issue you a version of that Bitcoin where now you can actually get some yield on it, and you can use it in a programmable manner. And I think that the adoption that's gained is small. I think it's actually going to be dwarfed. Just my prediction, it's going to be dwarfed by, because you're still leaving Bitcoin, right? You're still using a completely different blockchain. And again, speaking just to the philosophical Bitcoiner, no offense to CoreDAO, but their side chain to the I don't believe this, but the philosophical Bitcoiner says, well, that's a shitcoin chain, whatever, right? Now, if you can combine that concept with issuing a wrapped version of Bitcoin on Bitcoin and never having to leave the Bitcoin network, and still allowing people to use applications and get that stable yield. Now, that really, I think, is the winning play, and that's the exact design that we have implemented with OpNet.
But Chad, that is essentially your sales pitch right there.
Yes.
if you're going to stand in front of a crowd and sell what it is that you guys have built, that's exactly what it is, and it's a damn good sales pitch.
Well, thank you, and really, again, like, we built this to just off of observations and conversations that we had. Like, the overall protocol design is not maybe the design I would have come up with off the top of my head. It came from talking to people who look at ordinals and say, no, those are just JPEG scams, and talking to people who look at these other L2 solutions and say, no, I don't want to touch that stuff, even though I could get yield on my Bitcoin doing that type of thing. And also, again, looking at people who are willing to play with CoreDAO, or you obviously have other solutions. There's Babylon. There's a number of these types of solutions that are coming out, and all of those have sort of influenced our own protocol design. And we tried to design it with the Bitcoiner in mind. We tried to be, this is sort of our tagline, is the ideal Bitcoin meta protocol, because we want to be as aligned to Bitcoin as we possibly can. So it definitely is the sales pitch. But I do truly believe it in my heart of hearts that it's not going to be adopted by every Bitcoiner. Not every Bitcoiner is going to be wanting to put any amount of risk up with their Bitcoin. No, not every Bitcoiner is going to want to touch this type of stuff. But you don't have to leave Bitcoin, and that's really the environment we're trying to create.
Danny.
Yeah, well, I will say that the idea of hash time locked contracts for like backing an L2 or a wrapped version of Bitcoin is interesting. We discussed this quite a bit. The issues that we saw with that is that, let's say that I wrap one Bitcoin, and in that wrapping process, I lock that Bitcoin for a year. Well, if I add that Bitcoin to an LP and then you swap for it and you want to unwrap it, you're kind of fucked, like you can't do anything. So time locking for staking seems like a cool idea, where as long as you're the recipient back of that Bitcoin, then that makes sense. But unfortunately, that the HTLCs on Bitcoin are pretty non-customizable. Like when you set it upon deploy, you can't change you can't change the length, you can't change like the owner of the HTLC or anything like this. So they're a little bit limiting, but I think it's a cool idea. It definitely, like you said, it's got like 5,000 Bitcoin that has entered into TVL. So there's a want for people to play with Bitcoin for sure.
Like for me, like when you speak about those concerns, obviously they're real concerns, but then I start thinking, but surely there's another product that can be built, like a product that essentially says, well, if you want to sell your Bitcoin, we will sell it in escrow through a contractual process, so that if you do need liquidity and you can't sell it, well, we'll give it to you. You sell it to us at a discount, and then we'll give you the dollar value per se, or the Bitcoin value, but then transfer of ownership of that Bitcoin that is currently time locked then gets transferred to us. I'm just kind of just shooting from the hip here. You're probably thinking of all the possibilities as to how that can happen, but I'm just saying, like, that's, you know what I mean? That's just another avenue of what DeFi could possibly land up doing. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to dig into I guess the design that we chose for this, because again, it's sort of a similar concept, but to how someone like CoreDAO is doing it, but instead of using HTLCs or anything like that, we have tapped into what's called TapScript proof of authority vaults, and this is an undocumented piece of the Taproot upgrade that allows for effectively the user to create an on-chain vault that is owned by this proof of authority network of nodes of indexers. And when I so let's just say from the user's perspective, I want to use a lending protocol on Bitcoin that's powered by OpNet. I would wrap my Bitcoin. When I do that, I essentially create this vault that is owned by the network of indexers, and you get a programmable version of Bitcoin, this OP20 version of Bitcoin, which we're calling Wrap Bitcoin on Bitcoin, because that's exactly what it is. And now I can use that in a programmable fashion. And when I want to, and in fact, what this allows me to do is I can, in one transaction on Bitcoin, I can make one Bitcoin transaction and wrap my Bitcoin and make my swap or use the lending protocol. I could take my position. I could do whatever I want. I can interact with the smart contract and wrap my Bitcoin all in the same block. And then when I want to unwrap that Bitcoin, or let's just say even better, I make a trade and actually Danny ends up holding the Bitcoin that I wrapped. However that happens, let's just say I traded for some token and then Danny had that token and he sells his token and he ends up with some wrapped Bitcoin. Well, what he is able to do is he's able to unwrap that Bitcoin within 2 blocks. Basically, it takes 2 blocks to unwrap that Bitcoin, because these proof of authority vaults work where the indexers actually don't have to manually sign anything. They are doing they're basically pre-programmed with validity checks to make sure that your unwrap request is valid. And when you make your unwrap request, as long as it's valid, it just takes 2 blocks for the Bitcoin to be unwrapped and released to you. And that is the design that we chose because it's as seamless, as trustless as it can be, given obviously the limitations of Bitcoin in its current format. I know Danny probably wants to go into it a little bit more.
Yeah. So the basically the way that people do wrapping of Bitcoin for L2s right now is on what's called a federated system, so or federated network of nodes. So like Stacks uses this, and Liquid Network uses this. Kind of the OGs in the space tend to use this style for their multi-sigs. That's basically where there's like a single entry point in. So there's like a hard coded multi-sig where there's one address and everybody just sends this address, and then they get issued a version of Bitcoin on whatever chain exists that's backed by that Bitcoin there. And it's great, like it works, but it just is a manual process that takes 24 hours to bridge in and 24 hours to bridge out. So it's very, very slow moving for these federated systems. The way that we work is, it runs on proof of authority through TapScript, which is like an actual feature of TapScript that exists on chain. It's like a very basic version of a Bitcoin smart contract within the scripting language itself. And so basically, when a user wants to wrap in, they create a multi-sig address on chain actually through the transaction that's controlled by the different proof of authority multi-signers. And then within 1 block you're wrapped in, within 2 blocks you're wrapped out, like Chad said. It's a pretty seamless experience.
Right, and there's no single point of entry. So every time a user is wrapping Bitcoin, it's creating a new address, a new vault where that Bitcoin is stored. So there's a bunch of different addresses that are all owned by this proof of authority network.
Yep.
Okay, so I want to get into essentially what OPNet is doing, and then kind of like branching off into Motoswap as essentially a DEX. So let's start at the beginning. Like what is it actually all about in its essence? We've obviously spoken about very general topics, which obviously are attributed to what you guys have built. But let's get into kind of like the finer detail of OPNet.
Yeah, it's actually pretty simple. So there's basically within Bitcoin, because Bitcoin itself is not made to do NFTs or tokens or DeFi or any of these things. There's this kind of like, it's almost like a workaround that has been accepted by the market, which is this concept of off-chain indexing. So basically, like, if I'm a user and I open up my MetaMask wallet and my MetaMask wallet tells me that I have 100 Shiba Inu tokens or whatever, I, as the user, like I believe that MetaMask is telling me the truth, even though I'm using fully centralized services and I'm not verifying any of this stuff myself. I believe that Etherscan or MetaMask or all these different internet services, the information that they're telling me is accurate to the chain. And I kind of trust it just because if I ever want to, I can spin up a node myself and double check the information and it should all check out, right? So it's like, to the user, for developers, it's a bit different because they're kind of, seeing the actual chain, but the users really exist on the side of internet services when they're interacting with the blockchain. So this concept of off-chain indexing, you're indexing on-chain information and giving a result off-chain, is kind of the core part of all these meta protocols on Bitcoin. So essentially, like, ordinals and opnet work on the exact same type of tech stack where you basically make a Bitcoin transaction that has some extra arbitrary data inside of the transaction. When that transaction confirms, it's stored on the blockchain forever. It's not like that's going anywhere. Everyone can point to that information forever. And then through the indexing, whatever meta protocol you're using, for ordinals, they attach that information to basically a unit of Bitcoin called a SAT, which is like a serial number on a dollar bill, basically. So you can say whoever holds this dollar bill with this serial number also is the owner of this piece of on-chain information. And it's not really real, but the market, again, has kind of adopted this to where the users, they're just interacting with the same. They're interacting with websites and with wallets. And as long as the website and the wallet are accurate to these indexing rules, to the user, it doesn't really matter whether they actually own that Bitcoin information or not. The experience is the same.
You can think of ordinals. I know we haven't gotten into OpNet yet, but you could think of ordinals as, like, Danny loves to make this analogy, like, how you can buy a star. You go buy a star in the sky and name it or whatever. Similar to that, right? You're basically getting off-chain. You're putting data onto the Bitcoin blockchain, but since nobody can own data on the Bitcoin blockchain, you're getting basically like an off-chain receipt that says, hey, I own this piece of a Bitcoin block. And that's how ordinals work. And ordinals are made for this sort of NFT concept that we sort of just described, where you have this off-chain ownership of on-chain data. But the really, really, really interesting thing about ordinals is that you're putting data on-chain and off-chain, you're indexing that data. And again, they designed that just to do JPEGs.
So it's kind of flipped from like ERC 721 is the ownership is on chain and the data exists on IPFS or off chain, right? So it's flipped where ordinals is like the data is on chain, but your ownership is decided by these off chain indexers. So the end result to the user is this feels exactly the same as ERC 721. So in the case of OpNet, what we did is we took that concept and built upon of this indexing on-chain information and then kind of assigning ownership or tracking of it off-chain. And so when a user wants to like deploy a smart contract, they literally are making a Bitcoin transaction with all of the bytecode and the salt and the hash. All these things are inside of their transaction, which is then recorded on the blockchain. And instead of a SAT that we normally would point to like a JPEG or for something for ordinals, we tie that contract information with a Bitcoin address. So it's a little bit more familiar to like the Ethereum users where you have a contract address now. So that address is tied to the on-chain information through, again, TapScript, literally generates a Bitcoin address in the TapScript itself and then assigns that address to the contract. So the user is always on Bitcoin with OpNet, either deploying a smart contract or they are interacting with a smart contract. Interacting with a smart contract is the same idea where you're basically targeting the address of the contract you want to interact with, and then your call data is the bytecode of that is deployed in your actual Bitcoin transaction. So all of the data exists on chain, and then off chain are OpNet indexers, which the more familiar term to EVM people would be like a node, right? So off chain, these indexing nodes are looking at the on chain data, linking everything together and creating like a state of all of this stuff on Bitcoin. And then the user, when they connect their wallet or when they go on a website, it's calling the API of that indexer, and the indexer is giving, here's what you have in your wallet, here's what the contract says for this. It's just kind of acting like a middleman.
Right, and built in to the indexers is this. It's actually not an EVM. It's a Bitcoin virtual machine. But effectively,
It's awesome. It's a
yeah,
it's WebAssembly. Yeah.
yeah, it's a WebAssembly based virtual machine that basically, again, that is really what's executing all of the smart contract interactions, and yeah, so it's like we are plugging a virtual machine into Bitcoin and then allowing you to deploy your smart contracts through Bitcoin transactions and interact with those smart contracts through Bitcoin transactions.
So you guys obviously went into the weeds there, which was great. But this translates into something. It translates into a product, a functional protocol. In practical terms, what does OPNet offer the user right now? And you're very welcome to jump into Motoswap, but like, what is it offering right now? And then what are you guys looking to do kind of like in the short, medium to long term?
So OpNet basically allows anyone who holds just Bitcoin, that's all you need, Bitcoin in your wallet, you can now deploy a smart contract or interact with a smart contract on Bitcoin natively. So there's no extra gas token, there's no extra layers or extra blockchains. It's if you have any type of Bitcoin address, you can do smart contracts on Bitcoin now. And so what that might look like is something like Motoswap, which is a DEX that's literally a fork of Uniswap v2. We'll have v3 and v4 as well, but you can deploy an LP. You get LP tokens the same way that Uniswap v2 works. You can stake those LP tokens to liquidity mine other things like MasterChef, Sushi Swap style.
Right, we kind of combined some elements of Sushi Swap and Uniswap for Motoswap.
Cool.
Yeah. It's anything like whatever you can do with a smart contract, you can now do on Bitcoin with only Bitcoin in your wallet, which is a lot of people have not really moved over to Bitcoin because it's not so DeFi friendly right now. But any other programmable option requires some kind of gas token right now or other blockchain to exist while having on Bitcoin. So this is the first time where you don't need anything except for Bitcoin in your wallet to now deploy or interact with smart contracts on Bitcoin. And that's just that to us seems to be the reason why ordinals was so successful, is because you don't need, NFTs on Bitcoin is not like a new concept. People have been doing that for almost 10 years. It just always required some other kind of token or incentive model. It was never just Bitcoin. And then Casey Rodarmer, who created the Ordinal client, he's just kind of like a funny guy programmer. He was like, this seems like a fun project to work on. I don't think this is going to be a $10 billion market. And so he put the Ordinal client out with no profit model. And that's, of course, what took off because the user only needs to hold Bitcoin to work on this protocol. So OpNet's kind of the same thing, but now not just for NFTs, it's for also smart contracts.
Chad, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Danny and I, with our design here and just in general, subscribe to the Fat App thesis, and what that entails for us in terms of our protocol design is that basically we're looking at Bitcoin like computers before the internet, and we could, and people have tried theoretically to say, well, I could build a programmable layer for this, or I could use some sort of side chain, and I can make my own token. And with that token, I could raise money, I can make a bunch of money, etc. There's an instant profit model for me to do this, but it's fundamentally limiting for whatever solution they're trying to bring, because the highest you can ever possibly go with any application built on your solution is the height of your whatever token you're releasing. So just like the internet, for example, the internet has no there's no way to speculate on the internet itself as a protocol. And because of that, all of the value accrues in the applications built on top of it, which makes the internet simultaneously valueless and the most valuable thing in the entire world. And there's an unlimited cap on the value that can accrue into the applications that are built using the internet for that reason. And when we were looking to create some sort of solution for smart contracts and app development on Bitcoin, we're looking at Bitcoin as the that already is the highest cap in terms of any cryptocurrency that exists. So there isn't a need to have some sort of other value capturing piece to this. We need to have something that effectively acts like the internet for Bitcoin, that plugs directly into the Bitcoin blockchain, allows you to do all this stuff on chain. And so all the apps that are built using it, that are just really just built on Bitcoin layer one, all the value can flow into those applications. And that's sort of our rolling the dice a little bit in terms of where we make money or anything like that, because we don't make any money off of OpNet. We make money off of the application that we built, that we see as like a key first pillar of DeFi, and it kind of fills a big market need right now, especially in the Bitcoin space, because there are these types of experimental type tokens in the Bitcoin world right now, but there's no way to trade them in a liquid fashion. There is no DEX. There's nothing like that. They all trade in ways that are not user friendly, and frankly is somewhat ridiculous. So our gamble is that we'll build this protocol that allows for anyone to permissionlessly deploy any smart contract they want or build any application they want on Bitcoin layer one. And we compete by, we have to build a great application. And if people use that application and it gets great adoption, then the platform that we've built is successful. And if we don't provide a great user experience, then someone can come along and the free market can decide, someone can come along and put out a competitor product. And again, we lose market dominance. But no matter what, in my opinion, sort of the best outcome for all of that is if there's high competition in the market, that means that there's high demand for these applications, which means that inevitably we've succeeded in our underlying mission to bring app development, to bring something like DeFi to Bitcoin layer one in the first place. So that's our sort of underlying philosophy with all this stuff.
So
You,
truly,
you can. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
You can draw the comparison to like Arbitrum and Optimism as well, where like these are L2s that exist on Ethereum, but they still use the ETH token as their
Yeah.
gas token, and that's why they're the highest TVL. You know, like when you introduce a weird third thing, it's just kind of extracting capital from the people who want to play.
Yeah, I mean, when you were explaining, I was actually going to ask, like, so how does this? You call yourselves a meta protocol, right? But then it almost seems like what you're offering is like another blockchain, but I know that it's not. But it does have that vibe, you know. It's kind of like, well, we've created this thing that essentially allows you to interact with Bitcoin, and there's a whole interpretation around that, but you've just summed it up really cool. It's like it's merely an access point. We've built the gates. The gates are there. You can go through them and you can go into this, whatever you want to call it, this protocol. But it seems more than just a protocol. It seems like something else. You know, I
Well,
don't know whether. Yeah,
it really is a pure upgrade to Bitcoin layer one. And I know talking about it in the abstract can make it seem like it is this extra thing, and maybe in our name as well, OpNet maybe
yeah,
makes it
yeah,
seem like it's this new network, but it truly is just layer one Bitcoin. And this is sort of the thing that I think will emerge as more and more people use it. Obviously, we just released the public testnet today, and for Motoswap, the application, and for OpNet, and for allow people to start deploying smart contracts to Bitcoin. This is really going to be the thing that I think shifts people's perspective, is the user experience. And the user
yeah,
experience will shift this from, when we're talking about it in the abstract, it seems like, oh, there's this whole new thing, it's a different network, etc. Using Bitcoin with OpNet, quite literally, you're just making Bitcoin transactions. You stay on Bitcoin layer one. Everything you're doing is just on the Bitcoin blockchain. When you are making a transaction, when you're interacting with a smart contract, etc., you're using a Bitcoin wallet. Everything is just layer one Bitcoin. So talking about in the abstract, especially when we're talking about app development, especially when we're talking about smart contracts, execution, etc., it does make it feel like there's some extra layer, some other blockchain that's involved, but it really is all done on Bitcoin layer one, which I think is going to be the real thing that sets it apart from any other option, especially when it comes to harkening back to what we were talking about earlier, especially when it comes to attracting liquidity from existing Bitcoiners. You don't have to leave Bitcoin at all. In fact, you don't really have to. You don't have to do anything extra. All you really have to do is use Bitcoin the Bitcoin network. And that I think is sort of the killer versus everything, all these other like layer two or sidechain solutions, because you never have to leave the Bitcoin blockchain. And then again, as far as app development goes, there's a lot of resources that we've built out for people who want to develop applications. And so there's going to be, in my opinion, over the course of the next couple months, as we are live on the testnet, as we gear up for mainnet, there's going to be a number of applications that start launching or building these Bitcoin layer one apps. It's not just going to be Motoswap. There's going to be, there's already a number of them in development that we can maybe sort of get into, but there's going to be, ideally, there's endless, right? We want to see thousands and thousands of apps develop for Bitcoin.
If you go on DeFi Llama, there's over 1,000 tracked projects on Ethereum to this day, just in the DeFi section. So it's like especially when you bring in the concept of forking, which like, to anyone who's an EVM person, it's like, well, that's got to be a given, right? On Bitcoin right now, you can't fork anything. Like if somebody makes a cool thing, that's their cool thing to decide what can and can't happen with it. So we want to see this permissionless environment. Maybe this is a stupid example, but I like to say it's like putting a switch onto a Glock. We're going to turn the blockchain into a Glock chain. That's what I like to say.
Yeah. Again, a really good example of what Danny is talking about is this protocol that the guy who made Ordinals made, which is called the Runes protocol, which is an attempt at a fungible asset standard on Bitcoin. And, he programmed this Runes protocol to only be able to do a few things. You can deploy a token, you can mint a token, you could transfer a token, but you literally can't do anything else. You can't use these tokens in applications. You can't use these tokens with contracts. There's no programmability.
And you can't fork this client either. You can't fork the Runes like standard and make your own things, because if you make a fork to the Runes client and then now there's like a version of Runes here and a version of Runes there, and the marketplaces don't know which one to choose. It's just so clunky still to this day.
Right. And there's no way to even build an application for any of these assets. So I'll give you an example. Like for a Runes token, let's just say we wanted to build something that resembles a DEX for a Runes asset. Literally the way it would have to work, and this is just how the Runes protocol was built. If I want to build an application for Runes assets, I would have to basically, okay, I want to make a DEX. This is the basic layout for a Runes DEX, which isn't a DEX at all. But you basically send your Runes tokens to my wallet. Off chain, I manage the positions, and then I send when you make a swap or something. If you want to add to an LP, you send your tokens to my wallet, and I create some sort of LP in an off-chain order book. And when you want to make a swap, you send your tokens to my address, and I interact with the LP that's available, and I send you your tokens back. Which obviously that sounds psychotic and ridiculous.
It's like Ether Delta. It's like these old pre-Uniswap style trading markets where they weren't exactly a centralized exchange that you had to pay to get listed on, but it wasn't this permissionless environment where you can just, anybody can launch a token, add LP, and now it's listed on Uniswap. Right. Everything on Bitcoin is still pre-Uniswap days where you need like specific support if you want to do these types of liquidity pools. It's just a total nightmare if you're trying to do DeFi.
Right. Which is why our introduction of the ability to do smart contracts and build applications is so important for the space liquidity right now. Pools, yeah. It's so important for the space right now because there's such a gap in the market. It's insane.
Yeah. From a user experience, that's probably the single most important thing at the end of the day. In DeFi, we've gone through kind of like the walking through the mud and just making do with from tomb forks to we've been there, we've done that. It's kind of like, well, we've got to obviously transcend that in terms of how the space develops, and I think Bitcoin's like a really good example of how we've always made do with the basics, and we're fine with it, but we've got to reach a point now where we've got to obviously like improve. What have you guys done from that perspective in terms of the user experience?
So the user experience, in my opinion, it really depends on like the wallet that they're using, right? Like MetaMask is just kind of the standard for EVM. I don't think it's necessarily the best wallet for EVM, but everybody
I'd
is
like to
familiar with
just
that.
interrupt you. If you're still
Oh
using
yeah.
MetaMask to this day, then you're failing at everything that is DeFi. So I'm just putting it out there. There are way many options. I really like Rabby. I think it's a great product. It's got all those security checks in place. Make the move. If you haven't made the move, just trust me. It's a way better experience. To those that are listening, don't use MetaMask. It really is kind of like something from ancient times. Yes, it works. I understand, and you're scared, but we've got to move past that. Anyways, I had to put that in. And no, we're not sponsored by Rabby. I wish we were. I've tried. They're not interested in speaking to us. I love their product.
Oh,
I think it's way better than MetaMask.
that's really funny. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like the Bitcoin space doesn't even really have like a leading wallet yet. It
Yeah,
has two. There's two main brands. There's Xverse and there's Unisat. Most
yeah,
people use Xverse for ordinals. Most people use Unisat for like the Meta Protocol tokens, things like that. But they're still just very very starkly different from MetaMask. So we forked right now. We have a fork of Unisat wallet that. I mean, you can use the non-forked version and still interact with OpNet, of course. But on the forked version, we have like swapping in the wallet is natively supported. We have unwrapping and wrapping your Bitcoin directly in the wallet, deploying tokens directly in the wallet. So I think the UX from a wallet perspective should be a little bit more familiar to people who've used EVM style wallets before, even like Phantom, things like that. But then on the side of the developer experience is really where I think that we shine. And really that's where like the Bitcoin stuff is also lacking because the developer experience has to be somewhat good in order for the user experience to
yeah,
Right.
continue to get more better, so
DevX
it
DevX always drives UX, and
yeah.
yeah.
especially in a space that's basically there are no developers doing any of this type of stuff, especially in regards to app development.
Well, they're
The
trying. No, there are. There's just no standardization for them to follow.
Right.
Is
Yeah.
like the issue. So there are app developers. There are people making these like centralized type dexes and people trying to make staking platform. Even people trying to use like HTLCs with these meta protocol assets to kind of get a basic form of staking. Everything is really cool, but there's just no standardization. So if you're a new dev coming into the space, it's like you have no idea. You kind of just have to pick a direction and go and hope that you chose the right direction because there is no set path for you. So we have created basically a standardized suite of developer tools that they're npm packages right now that developers can use that mimic the Ether's Web3 JS library. So it basically is like if you're familiar, if you've built a DApp that MetaMask or Rabby or Phantom can connect to through Wallet Connect, you already are right now able to build a DApp on Bitcoin with OpNet because we kind of put the work into to make these standardized rules and just make it easy for you. So most of the time, like if you're a DeFi dev and you want to start making an ordinal DApp or something like that, you have to learn all about how Bitcoin works and how UTXOs work and how opcodes work. It's a fucking nightmare. Now you don't have to do that. You can just come right over and import your npm packages and get going.
So that's actually another sales pitch right there in terms of what it is that you guys have built. I mean, it
Absolutely.
really is. It is quite
Yeah.
compelling as well. So, yeah, well done, Danny. There seems to be a salesman in you as well. So, yeah. Chad, did you want to add anything on that? Sorry,
Yeah,
I
I
just
mean,
jumped
again,
in there.
as Danny said, like having this ease of access, like so for example, like a really easy thing. So let's just say, strictly speaking to the shitcoiner, right? You want to launch a token on Bitcoin. This is how easy it is. You could literally use our wallet, drop your the smart contract file for your token into our wallet and deploy it on Bitcoin directly from the wallet, right? Boom, just like that. And now you've deployed a smart contract directly onto the Bitcoin layer one network. And from another perspective, let's just say you want to do something like create a tax token. Danny literally just using Chat GPT didn't code a single line himself. Everything coded by Chat GPT in 1 hour was able to create a tax token and deploy that to the Bitcoin blockchain as well. So we're talking about this extremely, extremely easy to use dev experience. Now, once you actually get really experienced developers and people who are familiar with building dApps on every other programmable blockchain, once they see and use all of the things that we've created for them to be able to easily deploy dApps to Bitcoin, that is really where I think the user experience is going to actually really, really, really shine. Again, we've sort of tackled some of the really basic gaps right now in terms of user experience with our application Motoswap, which allows, again, the user to trustlessly, non-custodially, and permissionlessly create LPs, deploy tokens, create LPs, open trading, liquidity mine. There's a number of things that you can do with these tokens now is programmable and, most importantly, non-custodial and permissionless. So the user experience is much, much, much vastly improved as far as token trading with our application Motoswap. But I think that as more and more applications come into the space and start developing, we'll start to see a bunch of different user experiences emerge on Bitcoin layer one, whether it is, lending or staking your Bitcoin, or stablecoin protocols, stablecoin issuance. Bitcoin issued stablecoins, I think, are going to be a really, really, really hot narrative that again, OpNet really allows for super, super ease of access to deploy these types of applications. This is really where I think the user experience is going to shine. I mean, again, ideally, you have Bitcoin and you want to, let's just say I want to leverage myself on chain. I can take a loan out against my Bitcoin in a Aave style lending protocol in a Bitcoin issued stablecoin, and then I can go to a DEX like Motoswap, buy more Bitcoin, go back to the lending protocol, and stake more of my Bitcoin to get a little bit more. And again, I can leverage myself on chain in a way that's just so easy, right? It's extremely easy to do this. Obviously, that's not financial advice. I wouldn't inherently recommend doing
Listen
that.
to the DGen, everyone. Listen to the DGen.
Yeah, but I mean, again, for the DGen, right? But let's just say I'm the counterparty to that, right? And I want to get some yield, and I don't want a high amount of risk, right? I could be the counterparty who's staking my Bitcoin on Aave and just saying, "Hey, let the DGens degen," and that again, so that type of experience on Bitcoin layer one is completely foreign.
Absolutely.
And
there's a lot of like liquidity providers in the EVM space who are not like maxis about where their money is. These people are money maxis. They follow the yield, whether it's on this chain or it's on that chain. And then on Bitcoin, there's an entire group of the largest whales that are in crypto are on Bitcoin. And you also got to think about Bitcoin miners. The only way that they pay for their mining rigs is by selling the Bitcoin that they mine, and then hopefully, the price of Bitcoin pumps to where the little bit they have left is worth it. But it's really not like the Bitcoin miners are hoarding all this Bitcoin. Most of them are selling 50 to 80% of every single Bitcoin that they mine. So if the opportunity for like a new class of people who want to take loans out against Bitcoin are given the opportunity, there's billions of dollars in liquidity providers floating around on EVM chains just because that's where the money is right now, that I'm sure would be more than happy to earn 6% on their stable coins, lending it out to these Bitcoiners. And if I'm a Bitcoiner, I'm pretty sure that Bitcoin, if I'm confident enough to take a loan out against it, I think it's going to go up more than 5 or 6%. So it again is this like, it's kind of like the floodgates open for all of the money all the money that's just sitting on these EVM forks that's gaining not very much in APY could be moved to, it's kind of the same thesis as like Barachain, right? Where Barachain is this thesis of there's going to be a new EVM, it's going to have proof of liquidity, so all this liquidity that's floating around in the EVM space should just move to Barachain, and that'll have a DeFi resurgence. The theory really is the same on Bitcoin, except now you also have like institutional players and the biggest whales in the entire space who don't even have to leave their backyard to start playing these games.
Yeah, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's kind of like, where's the follow the money and the rest will fall into place. We are reaching the top of the hour. I wanted to just get into like what you guys are doing, from kind of like your short, medium, and long-term goals, and kind of maybe even hold you to account and revisit this conversation later on. But just really curious to see, like, where you guys are thinking and what your what are your potential prospects, but more importantly, like, where do you want to take this thing, and what does that roadmap look like?
Okay, real schizo talk here. Like
Yeah.
what could actually happen with this? Okay, so the first stage of OpNet will be this proof of authority based network where users can wrap their Bitcoin in if they want to. That Bitcoin is secured by the proof of authority nodes. We call them trusted indexers. And then the rest of the network doesn't have anything to do with these trusted indexers. It's just like an ordinal client relationship, basically. Once we get there's not a certain threshold number, but once we get enough wrap Bitcoin into this system where the trusted indexer network is maybe custodying a couple thousand Bitcoin or something, this is where we can change the consensus model of OpNet from proof of authority and upgrade it to proof of stake with Bitcoin itself. So the proof of stake method would basically be like, again, just arbitrary numbers here, but ETH is you stake 32 ETH and you can run an Ethereum validator. In our case, maybe it's you stake 1 Bitcoin and you can now run an OpNet validator as well that's earning part of these fees and it's securing the proof of authority, wrap Bitcoin, etc. So we want to get it to a point where proof of stake is happening because proof of stake allows for fees basically to be paid in wrapped Bitcoin as well, which that wrapped Bitcoin, the execution cost of a single transaction on OpNet will probably be higher than the sats per VB, like the normal network fee, because there's more data going into that execution, right? So there could reach a point where if every transaction in one block of a Bitcoin block is an OpNet transaction, the execution cost is higher than the actual network cost. And so more Bitcoin is paid to the OpNet proof of stake validators rather than the people mining Bitcoin themselves, because there's just a higher amount of money floating around in this fee side of things. It's still just normal Bitcoin, though. So once we have proof of stake on there, I mean, then shit can get really crazy. You basically could build actual L2s on top of Bitcoin through the OpNet proof of stake validators, the same way that Arbitrum and Optimism work as well. That's like, very, very far down the line, assuming everything goes just as planned. But that's kind of the 1, 2, 3 that I personally see going as is proof of authority, proof of stake, and then we can kind of start getting into these L2s that are secured by the proof of stake validators.
Yeah, I mean, you just put a delivery there that calls for at least another 2 shows, but let's just leave it.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, dude. I really appreciate it.
Let's go.
Like, let's just fuck with Jedi on a freaking Thursday morning. That's fine. Okay,
Hey,
I'll get you for that one.
sounds like we'll be
you.
talking a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Like let's just okay. We're gonna wrap it up over there. Thanks, guys. Really
Hell
cool.
yeah.
Really cool conversation. Yeah, I could carry on for at least another hour, but we're gonna lose people on this one.
Wait, I
Super
have
cool.
to know. What
Yes.
is your favorite Star Wars movie?
I think the Return of the Jedi. Yeah.
That's
My
an
favorite.
excellent choice.
Yeah.
That is an excellent choice.
Yeah. I kind of like Empire Strikes Back is also super cool. Like, kind of like the crescendo of it all. But I think Return of the Jedi is kind of like, when
Well,
you're a kid and
I'm
you're looking
I'm
for the
not
happy.
stripping, but I've got the Rebel Alliance tattoo.
Nice, dude. That's another show altogether. Like, do you get it? You either get it or you don't. It's like, what's your favorite?
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it's got to be the Return of the Jedi, or I mean, might be a controversial take, but
Yes.
I really enjoy Episode 3. I think that it's a beautiful crescendo to
Yes, it is.
two movies in the prequels. I think that the 2 prequel movies that preceded Episode 1 and 2 can be seen by some as a little bit boring and a little bit political, but it's amazing crescendo, and I think it really fills in a lot of the gaps of the
Yes.
Darth Vader origin story. And again, the emotional moment and the fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan is like, I mean, that is one of the most epic.
So clearly you like the messy bits, which is fine. I mean, it was messy. It was very messy. But
Yeah.
it was.
It was. I mean, again, nothing beats the original trilogy. Again, if I was to only pick 3, I would go original trilogy, prequels, and I personally I don't even count the Disney ones.
Bad.
Yeah, they're not great, guys. It's been awesome to chat. good luck in the trenches, because clearly this is very much, you guys are in the weeds, and it's been super cool to chat to you. And to anyone who's listening or watching, go follow these lunatics. They are on the cutting edge. Brave new world. Well done, lads. It's great to chat to you, and let's check in a few months. Take it easy.
All right, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a like, subscribe, and turn the notification bell on for next time. See ya.